to take a lot of pride and spend a lot of time considering what issues we're going to consider in committees, making sure they do line up with what the world is going to be facing. Not always the big issues, or at least not the ones that we see on the headlines necessarily. But as you're going to be debating throughout the weekend in your committees, I think you're going to see that they're all incredibly important. You know, the UN is a unique institution, and the world has changed dramatically since its instantiation over 70 years ago. At the time, in 1945, it was basically the only game in town when it came to international organizations. Everybody was involved. They tried to deal with the problems that its predecessor, the League of Nations, had. Tried to recognize that great power politics still affected international organizations, and so made a series of compromises. The Security Council providing certain vetoes, providing certain status for certain countries, as a necessary reality of bringing the world together in one room. The world has changed dramatically since then, and the UN is not the only game in town. There are other regional organizations. In fact, I know some of you are going to be simulating some of those today or over the course of our weekend, which are also critically important and are sometimes more well-suited to dealing with particular issues that affect our given region of the world. But the UN still has a role to play. It's often maligned. It's often looked to as the place where nothing gets done. When there are international problems, oh, why doesn't the UN solve it? But the thing about the UN is it's a mirror of the international world. States themselves participate in it, and states themselves need to take responsibility for their actions. The UN is an important institution for this, and it's a place where everyone gathers. Not always our friends either, but it's an important meeting place for everyone. A table where the sea is kept warm for every state, no matter their politics, no matter who they are. So it's important, I think, to recognize what we're learning about as you're looking at the difficulties of representing challenging countries, ones with whose foreign policy you may not necessarily agree, but nonetheless getting inside the inner logic of each of these states and figuring out how to solve these pressing issues of global concern. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for this evening. Minister Garneau has graciously offered to share his time with us this evening, and if we have time at the end, he might even be able to take a couple of questions. Just as a brief, by way of introduction, Marc Garneau has served his country his entire professional career, beginning with the Canadian Navy, and then as an astronaut and the president of the Canadian Space Agency, and now in political life. He made history by becoming Canada's first astronaut to fly in space in October 1984. In October of 2008, he was elected as the Member of Parliament for Westmount Ville-Marie, and in his first mandate served as the Liberal critic for industry, science and technology, as well as the leader's representative for Quebec. He was re-elected in Westmount Ville-Marie in May of 2011 and served as House Leader for the Liberal Party and critic for foreign affairs. He was re-elected for a third time in 2015 in the district of Notre-Dame-de-Grâce Westmount. He was later named Minister of Transport, made a Companion of the Order of Canada, Canada's highest civilian honor, and recently received a gold medal from the Canadian Geographical Society and became an honorary fellow of that society. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our guest speaker.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Chris. Bonjour à tous. Je suis très heureux d'être ici ce soir dans une salle qui est remplie de jeunes talents. Dans ma ville de résidence, Montréal, bien sûr, c'est très inspirant d'être avec vous ce soir. As I look around the room, I am impressed by the breadth of young talent that is assembled here for this weekend. I really hope that you'll have a great weekend. These types of conferences attract exceptionally smart, curious, motivated, driven young people who want to build a more efficient, a more livable, and a more resilient world. As Prime Minister Trudeau said, youth are not just the leaders of tomorrow, they are the leaders of today. And the actions taken now can have a significant and lasting impact on the world around us. The Prime Minister is a firm supporter of Canada's youth and is committed to the United Nations, as I am. Canada has a proud tradition of international leadership, from helping to create the United Nations after the Second World War, to the campaign against South African apartheid, to the international treaty to ban landmines. In fact, the City of Montreal plays an important part in world history. In 1987, member countries from across the globe agreed to the groundbreaking Montreal Protocol, designed to reduce the production and consumption of ozone-depleting substances and thereby protecting the Earth's fragile ozone layer. Whether confronting climate change, terrorism and radicalization, or international conflicts, the need for effective Canadian diplomacy has never been greater than it is today. Our government strongly supports the multilateral fora where important global discussions are held, including the G7, the G20, the OAS, the APEC, the WTO, the WHO, the Commonwealth, and La Francophonie, the Arctic Council, and of course NATO and the United Nations. We are in fact energetically, in the case of the UN, pursuing a 2-year term at the UN General Security Council. Under Prime Minister Trudeau's leadership, we are restoring Canada as a leader in the world, not only to provide greater security and economic growth for Canadians, but because Canada can make a real and valuable contribution to a more peaceful and prosperous world. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm Canada's Minister of Transport and Chair of the Canada-US Relations Committee, Cabinet Committee. I'm also, as was mentioned generously by Chris, the first Canadian to fly in space. In these capacities, I've had the good fortune of working at the international level, and that is what I want to talk to you about tonight. As Canadians, we believe in diversity, openness, and inclusion. We continuously work towards a better world because that's what Canadians do. Multilateralism and collaboration are key to the challenges we are facing. With our allies, we seek to bring peace, stability, and prosperity to all corners of the globe. Personally, as mentioned, I have the honor of chairing the Cabinet Committee on Canada-US Relations at a very busy time, as you can imagine. This committee considers issues aimed at fostering strong relations between Canada and the United States and the advancement of mutual interests. It is in this capacity that I, along with the Cabinet Ministers and the Prime Minister himself, travel regularly to the United States to raise Canada's profile as the United States' most important trade, energy, and security partner with influential political and business leaders. Our relationship with the U.S. is a special and important one. No two countries on this planet share deeper or broader connections than Canada and the United States. As John F. Kennedy once said, "Geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. Those whom God has so joined together, let no man put asunder." We certainly do have a lot of history with our neighbor. We have been allies for a very long time. The United States and Canada have been and continue to be the strongest and most reliable of all allies. United on the front lines of battle in 2 world wars, in Korea, in Afghanistan, and now in the global coalition against Daesh.